Welcome everyone this morning to MDI offices and also to those that are joining us online. It's great to have you all here. This is the fourth of our community gatherings. So we've done 3 prior to this, but this is the first time that we're also running a youth group in parallel. So for those that are online, we've actually got a group of our young members down the other side of the building having lots of fun and doing lots of different activities. So today we've got some really wonderful speakers that are going to talk about a variety of different things, but really a key purpose as well today is to bring people together, and that's really where all of this stemmed, an opportunity for those that have lived experience of Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy to be able to meet others in the community. So we really hope we'll be able to continue doing more of these into next year. This is very much, we're still at the trial and error, although you'd think we should be a bit more professional by the 4th attempt. But as you can see, we still have our technical issues, so we're getting there. So first up, I'm just going to introduce our first speaker. So we've got Dr. Laura Gallagher. Laura is a senior clinical psychologist in neurology and neurodevelopment, Children's Health Ireland at Tallaght. She has many years of experience working with children and young people with neuromuscular conditions, providing neurodevelopmental and neuropsychology assessment and therapy. Laura emphasises the importance of psychology working within the multidisciplinary medical services to recognise and support the varied developmental and psychological needs experienced by children and young people and their families.
Thank you. Thanks for the lovely introduction, Dimna. There was so much information in that, I probably don't need to say much more to introduce myself. And of course, there's a few people in the room who would know me. So I work in the neuromuscular clinic in Tallaght, and it's one part of my role. But I've always, since I finished my undergraduate, I've always worked with persons with physical disability. And when I qualified, it was what I returned to as well. It's always been I suppose my area of passion, my area of interest as well. Today's talk is about transitioning to secondary school. So I know that that's not going to be relevant for lots of people in the room, and it will have more relevance for others. And I suppose one of the things about the transition to secondary school is that it's one of many transitions, one of many milestones. Obviously, my experience is mostly with children and young people. And we were only just talking when I arrived about how sometimes the transition period from children's services to adult services is something that we as clinicians don't always spend as much energy in thinking about that as well. And it's lovely to be speaking, although I'm talking about transition to secondary school, I think even for us to start thinking about transitions and how we can support that. Those people in the room who know me or online will know that I have a tendency to talk a lot and go off script. So you can expect that will happen today. I know because we're trying to support through Zoom as well, we're going to try and keep questions towards the end, but I have tried to limit myself so that we will have enough time for any questions, because as I said, this will have particular relevance for some people, but the topic I think will, I hope, kind of bring up some discussions that I will learn a lot more from and that we'll all learn a lot more from as well. Okay. So as I said, I'm part of the Neurology and Neurodevelopmental Service in CHI at Tallaght. As part of that, I have always worked with young people with neuromuscular conditions, but we started in the last, I think it was just before COVID, I think it was probably 2020 the start, having psychology be part of the multidisciplinary clinics. How we run it in Tallaght, led by Prof. Denise MacDonald, is that it aims to be a one-stop shop. So we will have our neurodisability consultant, we've endocrinology, orthopedics, respiratory, cardiology, and OT and physio. And I wanted to be part of that as well. And I suppose the aims, although as I think everyone in the room will know, with all of the resource restrictions that you and your children will have experienced, sometimes often we don't get to what we aim to do. But the hope is that it's an integrated, co-located psychology service. And that aim is to help families, young people, families, parents and siblings, to access support and promote that holistic approach. So I would attend most, if not all, of the clinic appointments and link in with parents and young people at the appointment. But also, there's a lot of work that we would do outside of the appointment as well, outside of the clinic, because anyone who's been to that appointment will know it is long. And sometimes the last thing you want is psychology coming in to have a chat, because you've been there for 4 hours and it's time to go home. So as I said, I'm present, but a lot of the time the work that I would be doing would be with parents and young people afterwards. In terms of the type of support that I would try and provide, I try to come alongside a family and help the family at times of transition. When there are certain milestones that might be in relation to the progression of Duchenne, for example, or another neuromuscular condition, but also around, certain life milestones and developmental milestones as well. A lot of the work will be around initial diagnosis and the experience of treatment, and that could be the experience coming to the clinic or the experience of any medications and impacts of that. And then again, adjustment to changes and the functional impact of that. I do have a role to do assessment as well. So I do a lot of neuropsychology assessment, developmental, cognitive, social, emotional and behavioural concerns we would explore. Sometimes it'll come up in clinic and we'll say, let's come back to this in 6 months' time, let's come back to it in 12 months' time. So that's what we aim for. So as I'd said, I do a lot of assessment and consultation, parent support and intervention, and often intervention with the child or young person. And often those things are seen in any psychology service and in any medical service, they're often seen as distinct or separate. But my experience is that when you're working with young people and children with a neuromuscular condition, that there's not really a value in seeing those things as separate, because sometimes, for example, in transition to secondary school, having a neuropsych assessment might be the intervention. It might be the thing that's really useful to help you understand what your strengths are, what your needs are. So I suppose, again, our aim is to try and come alongside a young person and family and see what, at that particular part of their journey, what their needs are, and kind of weave those pieces of care together. And we aim to be responsive. I touched on this already. There are certain points of transition, certain points of change where psychology supports are particularly useful. And that's when I would try and target the types of work that I would do to those particular times. And one big one is preparing for the transition to second level. I suppose as well, for those at home and in the room, we know a lot about transition to second level, not only just if we're young people who have a neuromuscular condition or the parents of young people with a neuromuscular condition. It's a big deal going to secondary school for everyone. It's a big milestone. And I suppose what's different about it? One of the biggest things that I've experienced around the big shift in secondary school is that because it's a bigger school, it's a bigger environment, the routine is different, but the routine can feel much more formal. And it can feel for lots of young people going into secondary school that there isn't as much space to make things their own, and maybe a greater sense of having to go along with what the big routine is. And the secondary schools would tend to have these things at the same time. You'll have your midterms, your exam weeks, and you'll have the different aspects of the routine. And it's a shift, a big shift from primary for everyone. The second biggest thing about secondary school is all of a sudden going for multiple subjects. You'll always have been doing different subjects, different things, but to all of a sudden have different teachers, different people you have to develop relationships with. You have to move between different parts of the school. You have so many aspects that come about that become just a little bit more challenging from an organizational point of view, just by the environment of the secondary school. Then there's all the books, the materials, there's the timetable. Most primary school kids don't have a notion about a timetable. It's not something that they have had to need to know. And so even just going in your orientation and getting your timetable is a big adjustment for what you have to then do. Choices. The idea of choice, again, is not something we really prepare primary school students for. Yep, there's, extracurricular things, but a lot of times those choices are determined more by, what's close by, what your friends are doing. So when you go into secondary school, you're all of a sudden asked to make these big choices about what subjects you're going to do. And you're kind of told, well, that's it for 5 or 6 years. So that's another big piece that's different for anyone who's making that transition. And homework. It's massive. Anyone who's had anyone in secondary school that all of a sudden goes from, it's great that you get it done, to actually use some ownership as to whether it's done or not. So for me, just thinking about secondary school and what we're asking of our 12, 13-year-olds, it's a reminder of what a transition, what a move that is. The skills that are required for secondary school students, it's a big jump, it's a big shift. Thinking about the timetable, the organizational skills that you need. It might sound like I'm saying this as though every secondary school child or young person goes in and does this all by themselves. Of course, they don't. There are parents and carers who are getting books ready, washing uniforms, doing all of those things. But again, when you're in secondary school, when you're the one who has the timetable, there is an element of responsibility there that wasn't there before, and that really requires strong organizational skills. And I think, as a neuropsychologist, the types of organizational skills that we're asking teenagers to have, we wouldn't even expect them to have them that well developed from a neurodevelopmental perspective. And yet that's the ask, and they're the demands that are there. Linked to that is the time management piece. Of course, you'll be under the watchful eye of parents, but you'll have to decide, am I going to leave? I don't have history again until Wednesday. Am I going to do that work or not? And that it's a big learning curve, one that changes all throughout your journey in secondary school, but it can be, the demand of that can feel big when you move. The idea of self-monitoring, the responsibility that you need to take for your own work, it steps up a gear as well. And study skills, the land that happens for many first years, thinking that the exam week has come and that actually they're supposed to be doing exams. This is a new demand, a new thing for them. I think one of the most important things that I see as a shift for all secondary school students is the interpersonal skills that you need. You need to be able to negotiate not only with all of these new teachers. You don't just have one person to think of. You have all of the teachers. You have the year head. You have the whoever is coming in, subs, lots of new people, new figures of authority, new experts coming into your life. Not to mind the fact that if you've gone to a school that is maybe in the town, whereas your primary school was a little bit further out, a little bit smaller, you have a whole new peer group, Or if you have some peers from your primary school, trying to integrate that at 12 or 13, you know, it's a massive thing for an adult to try and get different groups from different areas to all happen and engage at the same time. So it's a huge ask. And I suppose I think that it's a lot all at once for any secondary school student. But as I said, everyone does it. So we all had to go to secondary school and everyone does. So what's different with Duchenne? The transition to secondary school, the timing of that at your 12 or 13, it's an important milestone on that journey to adulthood. Of course, you're still 12. You still got to do what you're told, hopefully, most of the time. But at the same time, it's seen as this big marker. It's seen as a milestone. And it's big for parents and it's big for the young person as well. And it's particularly big if you have a neuromuscular condition. And specifically thinking about Duchenne and thinking about the progression, the preparation for secondary school. So when you're thinking about, you know, usually 5th class, you start thinking about it, or parents at least start thinking about it. And that can coincide with functional changes that are associated with the progression of Duchenne. So changes in muscle strength, perhaps maybe some upper limb muscle strength changes. Equipment and adaptations are often in place at that time, but they're relatively new. You know, they're often in place, but it's still a piece that comes up that coincides. And there's an evolution then in terms of the types of needs that you'd have from the hospital or from different therapists. And sometimes it can be around medication or, you know, a shift in terms of steroids. And there is the massive psychological shift that happens when you're on that journey, starting into secondary school, and at the same time quite aware of your own functional changes and the experience of that. Often parents, when I would meet with parents and young people, but more parents will say, I'm not really focused on school. It's not the be all and end all. And it shouldn't be. But I suppose we often see school, particularly in our own education system, we see it as, you know, you get into secondary and then as you're into the junior cycle and then you're in, maybe you'll get transition year and then you're into the senior cycle. We look at it as educational milestones. And of course, it is an educational shift. But actually, it's a personal milestone. It's a life milestone. And the whole idea of secondary school should be to enhance a teenager's quality of life. It should be about school itself being, for the most part, an enjoyable experience, somewhere where you get to form your identity. That's what, if we think about any of the psychological models of development and identity formation, this time it is about trying out different roles, learning more about yourself. And school should be the place where you can experience that. Of course, there'll be exams. That's just part of it. We can't change the system. But it is, I suppose, I think it's part of my role and any of us who are working with young people to always bring the focus back to it's a journey. It's an educational journey. It's an education experience. And we need to encourage ourselves and encourage the system to stop focusing on these specific endpoints that are about the junior, that are about the leaving and then moving out. It's not about getting to adulthood. It's about learning who you are along that journey. That's the ideal. But of course, there are things that make that something you have to actively work on and try and choose. And I suppose that's why when Dimna was saying to me about the gathering that was happening, and I was saying, well, I think if I would talk about anything, it probably would be the transition to secondary school. And it's why I was thinking about that idea of planning for success. The parents that I've met over the course of the last 15 years working in this area tend to be some of the most organised and forward planning people that I've ever come across. The level of research, the level of preempting the issues that are going to happen. And that's because that's been necessary. So in terms of planning for success, I suppose it's first of all thinking about the environment. I'm not going to chat about this very much because I'm well aware from working with OTs all of my career, psychologists aren't the best at knowing about this. And it's much better that we take a back seat and let our OT colleagues take the wheel for this piece. But of course, in that planning, in that effort to get things ready and plan for success, there will be many evenings of researching and engaging with, you know, whether it be the CDNT, whether it be primary care OT or whoever it is, or sometimes with the clinics, the therapists in the clinics. You will have explored access well in advance of secondary school start, because you have to, and that's the important piece. So things like, I suppose, access, safety, how how user friendly the toilets are, as opposed to they're present and that's great, but you know how well this will help you experience secondary school as, you know, your journey as well. And equipment needs, and then the S&A resource and all of the many things that you need to do before that. Another big piece in terms of planning for success is the school staff awareness and their knowledge. And okay, there's very practical things that school staff, maybe S&As or resource teachers might need to know in terms of meeting physical needs. But it's, I suppose, my experience has always been the best transitions are when there's an openness to learning and to looking at the holistic picture. There's the resource, there's the, you know, the S&A, there's what you need, but there's actually going back, taking a step back, seeing it as a journey, an important milestone, and how do you support the young person in that? There's the planning. And a lot, I suppose, for me, this is the bit where the young person becomes central to it. Is a lot of the time, because this has been getting going from 4th, 5th class, it's really only in, oh yeah, I'm 6th class and I'm going now, I'm talking about where my friends are going, that you start thinking about it as a young person yourself. And I suppose advice around that would be particular for young people with Duchenne is, when the decision is made on what school that you're going to, actually reading up on the routine and the structure, finding out when the half day is for this school, finding out, are they one of the schools that do 9 classes slightly shorter, do they do 7 and slightly longer? It might even, for some people, that might form part of the decision making around the school, but certainly in the planning to get yourself ready, the readiness for secondary school. It's looking at the routine structure. Most of that's available on school websites, but it's a massive piece. And it is something that the young person themselves can begin to take a little bit more ownership of as well. Within that, considering the subject choices in advance, knowing what the school does. Some schools, it would be my preference, they'll offer a taster. So you might get your first term, or you might even get the whole of first year to see what do you like, so you don't end up in German and actually it's like, I hate it, I don't want to do that. I suppose, again, thinking about how we want to support young people to plan for success and to promote independence, the subject choices need to be a space where they start to make some choice around that. It is completely natural and developmentally appropriate for a young person to go in to secondary school and say, well, like, Mark is doing this, so I want to do that as well. Or I heard that teacher is really grumpy, so I don't want to do French. So they're understandable, developmentally appropriate that you would make, and a young person will make those kind of short-term decisions. And then the job in terms of planning for success is trying to help them do what's not really within not an appropriate expectation, but to forward plan, to look into the future and say, actually, for some of these subject choices, you are making a decision that's going to really shape a lot of your secondary school. So there's a value in making that a supported decision to start developing some ownership and some, I suppose, some empowerment around this. This is your transition. These are choices you get to make and shape, and how important that is. Within that, very much related to the subject choices, are this active planning around what your own learning style is. And that's particularly important for someone with a neuromuscular condition or with Duchenne. Making the choices around your subjects and around your structure and your routine in the day, making those choices, knowing what your own learning strengths and areas of greater challenge are. And I suppose why I say that's particularly important for young people with Duchenne is that it has been identified that I think the most recent research is saying that up to a third of young people with Duchenne might experience some learning need. I, as a neuropsychologist, I'd be a consumer of research, and I'm always very interested in any findings that come out. Also, as somebody who's working clinically for years with young people with Duchenne, I always go back to the part that the varied cognitive profile is what you need to expect. That just like us all, we all have strengths and needs. If I was to do a cognitive assessment with us all here, we will all have areas of strength and need. What I would often say to anyone who's done an assessment with me is, you know, I myself know I haven't done the assessment. I'm not allowed because I'm too practiced at it. But if I were to do an assessment, my visual spatial skills are not great. They never have been. I hated geography. I couldn't make sense of maps. Driving was a huge achievement for me. And that's my learning style. But it's part of who I am. I was never going to be an engineer. I was never going to be an architect. My strength is in talking, and that's what I went and did. So there are certain learning profiles that we know are that bit more common for young people with Duchenne, but that always should be secondary. The primary piece is that we all have a varied cognitive profile, and that if our resources were as they should be, that anyone who felt that they had a learning need would have access to a neuropsych assessment or to a cognitive assessment to learn about that. If you do have access, and I know it wouldn't be fair to sit up here and pretend that people do, but in CDNTs where there is access to cognitive assessment, or if you have access through, say, the services or the clinics that you attend, transition to secondary school is a great time to do it. Transition from secondary school, if you don't get it till senior cycle, that's absolutely a great time too. But the transition to secondary school can be a great time to do that because it can link back to that piece about the subject choices. It can link back to that piece around promoting independence and planning for success. We don't know what our learning styles are. I'm talking about what mine is now with the benefit of years of experience and, 30 odd years on. But we don't know it, and that's the whole point of a cognitive assessment. That's what we should be able to support people with. When you do think about the particular difficulties that, my clinical experience and the research would say are more common in Duchenne, it's not there for everyone. It goes back to the varied profile. But when you think about those difficulties that are more common, we're thinking about things that actually really impact the secondary school journey. So you're looking at motor speed and fatigue, and processing speed. How I explain processing speed is we try and get an idea of the speed with which somebody thinks. That's the aim of it. But the only way you get that is by somebody gives you an answer either verbally or by pointing. So we talk about mental processing speed, but very often it's highly, highly influenced by your oral motor processing speed, by your motor planning, and it's very influenced by actually your fine motor ability and fatigue. So you'll often see processing speed is identified as a difficulty, but it's important to look at that as often secondary from a motor perspective as well. One piece then that's very commonly found is needs in relation to executive function. So when we talk about executive function, it's like you're talking about, if you were to imagine that your brain is a company or a business, the executive function are like the board and the CEO who's looking at the overall activity and trying to say, we need to stop doing that now and you need to start doing this. Or, I know you're really, really cross and you really feel like shouting, but actually we need to pull back from that because it's going to get you in a load of trouble. So that idea of inhibition, trying to stop ourselves doing what we feel like doing because we know it's not a useful thing to do in the moment. So thinking about self-monitoring and impulsivity, these are hugely important skills for all of us. They're developing skills in teenagers. There's a lot of evidence, I would say, in the last 10 years that executive function skills are associated with the frontal lobe of our brain, and maturation in the frontal lobe, I think they're saying now, is going up into age 23, age 24. So we're asking 12-year-olds to have all of these organizational skills, to not give out in class when they're given what they think is a massively unfair project. We're asking them to have the skills that developmentally they really wouldn't be at yet. And then if you think about in terms of Duchenne, they're more likely to have difficulties in those areas as well. And then most importantly, academics relies really heavily on those cognitive skills. You think about working memory is something that often comes up. And when I explain working memory, say if you imagine you're going into a shop and you see a sign that says 20% off and it has the original price. So your working memory is the skill that you need when you hold 20% in your mind and you hold the other price. And holding those things in mind and being able to work on them. Of course, it depends on how good you are at your maths without a calculator, but actually it really depends on how well able you are to hold those pieces of mind and pieces of information in mind and work on them. And academics skills, they're really heavily built on those executive function skills. So if you are a young person with Duchenne who knows themselves or has learned through a neuropsych assessment that actually these are areas that are a bit more challenging for me, then you're going to need more active planning around how to manage that, say with your timetable, or maybe it's in getting parents involved and your SNA involved in how you want to structure things, even with your materials and things like that. This slide talks, I suppose, goes back to numbers and goes back to that piece around the research. So these numbers here around neurodevelopmental or mental health diagnoses, they come from a really recent piece of research. And it says that there is a higher prevalence of neurodevelopmental or mental health diagnoses in young people with Duchenne. So as a 7% prevalence of autism, which I suppose we would say that typically in the general population, 1% would be the prevalence of autism. And then an 18% prevalence of ADD, so attention deficit disorder, or ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I suppose, again, this to me, so I'm going to talk about it in a minute as well, again goes back to that importance of the varied profile. The diagnoses themselves, they can be useful. It can be a useful process, often because you'll get a diagnosis on the back of having done assessments. So it can be a useful process. But actually, if you take the neuropsychological approach, or the acceptance and expectation that there's going to be a varied profile, it's going to be a very cognitive profile, it's going to be a varied emotional profile, it's going to be a varied behavioral profile, because that's what we expect from all young people and adults. So while, yes, a diagnosis can be really useful, it can be something that's worth pursuing, the process of that is most important. Sadly, a lot of services, a lot of resources, our systems, we say we're not determined by diagnosis. We are. Everyone knows that. Whether it be the education system or the health system, the CDNT, we know that diagnoses play a really important role in that. But I suppose if we're talking about planning for success, it's not the diagnosis that's going to help you do that. It's going to be developing that understanding of your own profile, family understanding that profile, and actually the school understanding it is going to be massive. And again, it's really important to look at the areas within your own learning or cognitive profile that would have a role in those social and emotional challenges. So thinking about, the executive function skill of inhibition, the thing that stops you from roaring at somebody who stole your car park space. That is a really important skill in itself. That's massively important in terms of, but it's massively important in terms of your emotional regulation, your day-to-day experience. So of course, you are more likely to experience or have a diagnosis of ADHD if you experience difficulties with impulsivity. But actually, how much help is the diagnosis going to be? It's much more important to know in these situations, I need to have like a reminder. And sometimes your parents need to act as parents, you'll need to act as like the sieve. So it'd say that behavior is like the rice that's falling out from a pot. And you've a sieve because there's things that you don't want to let out, that it's not useful to let out because it won't get you the car park space in the first place. And cognitive flexibility, again, really linked to the executive function skills. So I suppose my main take-home message for that is from the get-go, whether it be through assessment or whether it be through your own reflection as a family on your own learning style and your experience, what you hear from school, what you know from experiencing school, is thinking about understanding your own profile and making choices with that in mind. Like I said, I'd never have been an engineer and I got out of geography as soon as I could. So it is making those choices on the back of what you know of yourself or you know of your child. I suppose this bit, I imagine it might prompt some questions and some discussion from ourselves, but if you think about the transition to secondary school, if you think about the age, so coming up 11, 12, 13, and you think about how for any young person, that's a time when you are developing your sense of yourself. You'll be massively different at 22 to how you are at 12, of course, but it is a stage in life where we start to understand ourselves in relation to our peer group and in relation to those figures of authority. So it is a time that prompts a lot of questions about yourself, about your learning profile, about your friends, about your values, about what matters to you. And it's evolving. And of course, it's a time where there will be likely many more questions around your own medical history, your own experiences, your diagnosis if you have one. And I suppose I'm conscious that everyone here that I know of is a parent of a child who's probably over 6. So you'll know that there are different answers to different questions and that your child's questions they evolve over time. So the questions that a child will ask you at 6, if they have Duchenne, are going to be very different to the questions that they're asking at 11, 12 and 14. And your answers are going to shift with that. So part of it is the fact that you're coming to that stage at 12 where you are moving more out into the world. But it's a transition. Any transition prompts questions. A lot of the time it's when a young person with Duchenne does come off their feet, when there's more equipment needs, or when there's initial, wheelchair assessments. It's often a time where those transitions are prompting lots of questions. And it's, again, I wouldn't dare to tell anyone in the room about this. You'll know yourself. There's no answer. There's no one answer. There's no one discussion. There's no one question. Because for everyone, you're learning more about yourself and you're evolving and you're able to take on more information and you're able to ask questions about different pieces of information as you grow. And so when you're thinking about the types of questions that might be prompted for a child who's going into secondary school or starting in secondary school, for me, it's the same piece of advice that I'd give for parents of a 5-year-old, is go back to what it is that your young person is asking you and what it is that they know, what it is that they want to know, and more important than anything else, what information do they want their peers, do they want the school to have? What information do they not want them to have? And I suppose there's that piece about going with what you're, as a young person or as a parent of a young person, what the young person is ready and willing to share with others. But I think one of the biggest things in that has to be the acceptance that you're often asked to share information that you don't want to share, that it's in some way the environment has forced that upon you. And the difficulty in that sense of not having that ownership over your own information, perhaps because you need adaptations or you need different pieces of equipment, that the choices around that, they're not, they're curtailed for lots of young people. Thinking about that and about kind of choices, it's looking at the transition to secondary school as an important milestone for young people and their parents. It's a marker for growing independence. You know, it's the time when you start maybe thinking about it, different transport you might be getting, again, building greater independence. So while the secondary school journey for all of us is this big marker of growing independence, because it can coincide with functional changes in Duchenne, it can be experienced as something that is, your independence, you can experience that as being curtailed. In the same way as choices are made for you, the things that you want to become more independent at, you may need to ask for more support with, which is a very deeply difficult experience. So again, the piece around that is about promoting independence at all stages. And it's independence, for me, it's independence of choice. And one of the biggest things, whenever you're looking at the idea of a capacity assessment, you know, for anyone, whether of any age who is having, there's legal documents they need to sign, and so we'll be asking around your capacity to do that, and there's legislation around that. As psychologists, the one thing that we come back to around capacity is it's not just that you've ability to make the right choice, you've ability to make the wrong choice. That it's you get to make the choice. If you have the ability to think through it and choose something that no one else in your family wants, it's your choice. If you have the capacity to do that, we need to leave that opportunity, that independence of choice for everyone. And especially for those who experience their independence as curtailed in other ways. It is more important then to have that independence of choice and independence of thought, even if you know as a parent it's going to cause trouble. How many times do you watch them go straight forward into something you know is not going to end well, but you don't get a chance to curtail that choice for most young people, and we ought not get it when we're parents of young people with a neuromuscular condition or a physical disability. The other piece then is the independence of thought and the independence through choice. Directing support. It's a massive one for young people going into secondary school, because in a primary school class, the way an SNA is there, it can be very different depending on the class, depending on the resources and everything else. But there is an expectation that the SNA will be near you, around you, a lot. That can be a nightmare, as everyone would know. You're 12, you're 13, you're trying to make friends with this whole new people from the town that you don't know, and you have someone who you worry is going to rattle you, or whatever it is that you've said or done. So we are again asking our young people at 12, 13, who are developing their executive function skills, developing their emotional regulation skills, to do some interpersonal negotiation that most of us would find really, really difficult in our 20s and 30s. So it's, I suppose, from those early stages, looking at 5th class and 6th class, developing that sense of independence, of choice, and making opportunities for a young person to direct support and to ask for support when they need it, and ask for the support to be reduced when they don't want it, even if people think that they need it. I think that's it. That's something that needs to start sooner than when they land into secondary school and they have all of these different pieces that they have to negotiate. I think I'm coming up on my last slide now. And I suppose it's probably the biggest one, and probably the one that doesn't even need to be said. Talking about transition, talking about this experience for all young people, and the particular experience that somebody who has a Duchenne diagnosis is likely to have. It is massive in terms of the emotional experience that you have in that transition. Any transition is an ending of something and a beginning of something else. And with that, there's always going to be an experience of loss. No matter how much you look forward to this sense of growing independence, there's experience of loss for the young person. This idea that now I'm supposed to be in charge of my own homework, my own timetable. The sense of kind of that moving on from that young period of childhood, which can feel much more protected. And it can be a massive experience of loss and threat for a parent. It can be a sense, even if it's not maybe another person's reality, you can feel yourself when they're in primary school, they're in the one class, I dropped them off, I picked them up, and I know what their experience is in that time. But your experience then of they're moving out into this bigger world, and there can be that sense of loss and threat with that. Every psychologist is going to tell you that rather than doing anything with those feelings, the most important thing is to acknowledge them. It's massive. This is a massive time. You will say things you don't mean. You'll make decisions that you regret. And then you'll accidentally make decisions that will turn out to be the best thing, because it's just a hugely emotional time. And I put in accessing support when you can. From being in the neuromuscular clinic, I think I'm 0.1. I think I'm supposed to be a half a day assigned to neuromuscular for my whole role. The needs for support are in no way being met by the resources that we have. So I wouldn't like to sit up here and say, make sure you go and access support when you go looking and it's not there. Whether you're a young person or whether you're a parent, you know, and the same thing with these neuropsych assessments. Great if you get them. How often do people get them? Not everyone I work with can I offer that to. So I suppose that's why I'd say the most important piece is acknowledging that feeling and that experience for yourself. It is as big as you think it is, and it is as important as you think it is. And I suppose asking for the support, even if you know, for example, I would always encourage people who are in the clinic in Tallaght, ask it, say it. We should be writing this down. We should be saying we don't have anywhere near enough support, in the hope that we will be able to advocate for more.
But I'm delighted to welcome Conor up next to speak. So Conor is a content creator and speaker, and through his work, Conor speaks about his journey with Duchenne and how he advocates for people with disability. He is currently an intern with RTE's social team, and Conor is going to explain how, through all the struggles, he has gotten to where he is today. So we'll pass it over to Conor, and he's put together a presentation as well for us.
So hi everyone, my name is Conor McAuley. I have Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy, and I'm going to tell you today about my story from then to now and how I've gotten to where I am today. Before I go into my presentation, I do want to give myself a little bit of an introduction. So I'm a full-time wheelchair user who has Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy. I'm a recent social media intern with RTE. Unfortunately, I finished up yesterday. I'm also an advocate for people with disabilities, and I've worked with various organisations on improving access across Ireland. So my disability is Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy. It's a muscle wasting disease. Unfortunately, at the moment, there is no cure, but people are working very hard out there, so I hope there is one soon. I was diagnosed at age 3.5 after 18 months of my mum bringing me to numerous doctors. My sort of symptoms were I walked on my tiptoes, I kept falling over, and I struggled to get back up onto my feet, and I couldn't also pedal the bike. So after diagnosis, my family didn't have a family history of this illness, so it was a fluke. I attended Temple Street Hospital, the CRC, and I also attended speech and language at 4 years old. MDI linked me to support my family and advise my parents on how to prepare for family living with the condition. And we also did adopt our house, which came at a huge cost to us. And I also did get my first manual chair when I was 5, and I also started on steroids at that age. So resources. Well, myself and my sister went along to MDI's kids clubs. We also went on family days out with each other, with other MDI families. It was a great support to all of us being able to link in with people that were going through the same thing as us. And me and my family have a lot to thank MDI for. There are also a lot of other charities you can get in touch with. Make-A-Wish, we got to get in touch with Make-A-Wish, and we went on a dream holiday when I was 6 or 7 to Disneyland, Florida. And Share a Dream we also got in touch with, which is the Irish version of Make-A-Wish. And also I heard MDI did a competition recently with Bardstown, so I'm glad to hear that they are linked in with them as well. So primary school. Well, firstly, in primary school, I had a full-time SNA. Unfortunately, I struggled to keep up with my classmates as I couldn't retain a lot of information. I had a psychologist who was linked in with school and home, and I was then diagnosed with dyslexia and found out that a high percentage of boys with DMD struggle with their memory because of the lack of dystrophin to the brain. So break times could be very hard as my SNA stayed with me. I couldn't run around with other boys or play football, and my manual chair was always in the background. To be honest, I don't have much memories from before the age of 10, as I think over the years I've blocked them out. Maybe it could be trauma, I really don't know. But in what I first remember is about 5th class and up. So in 5th class, I started to get angry and frustrated, watching other people do stuff I couldn't. Started banging my head against walls. I was gaining a lot of weight with the steroids. My mom felt the steroids were starting to do more harm than good, so she slowly weaned me off them. But after that, another problem came along where I started to dwell on how I looked and my weight. That's how I looked while I was still on the end of taking steroids, but in the next slide, you'll see how I looked after. So by the time I was starting secondary school, the hair, I know, the hair. By the time I was starting secondary school, I was underweight, but I was still walking. To be honest, I couldn't really think straight, and I was starting to convince myself I didn't have DMD. As I was still walking, it was very confusing seeing all my friends with DMD at a different stage than me. I also hid my wheelchair in the first aid room and would make up excuses to why I used the lift, like I had a sore foot or an injury. It got worse as the year went on, as I had a fall in school, and for safety reasons, the school would have preferred me to get into a manual chair, which at the time I didn't want to do because I was still walking and I wanted to feel independent. So my mental health got worse, unfortunately, after this incident. I couldn't accept having an SNA or going to resource, and I just wanted to be like everyone else. I started to get very annoyed and I felt smothered, and I hid my disability, which ended up being exhausting and upsetting to me because it took a real big toll on me. It was hard to make friends because I wasn't being myself, and I found it hard to open up. That was really tough because I was pretending to be somebody else. So nobody could actually get to know who I actually was. And funny enough, to myself, I was sort of pretending to be somebody else. So I never really got to know myself. By the time I was in 3rd year, my life was unfortunately like falling apart. I completely shut off from everyone. I had to see the psychiatrist weekly, and at that time, I remember saying things like, oh, I want to fail my junior cert on purpose and I don't want to do this, just out of anger and frustration because I just couldn't deal with everything that was going on. So moving forward, so the acceptance towards myself was improving. I still struggled to keep friends because there was a bit more honesty coming out, but I still wasn't there. I started to put myself out there, but still struggled to keep friends, as I say, over my condition. Avoiding conversation, so I wouldn't like to talk about my condition. I know there was a big thing years ago where disabilities were sort of hidden back, and it's changed a little bit now, but when I was younger, it was sort of like, don't talk about this, sort of keep it quiet. It's a very actually Irish thing if you think about it. But after a lot of counselling, my confidence was on the rise again. So I went into fourth year the year after, so that was me in third year with my sisters there. And I did public speaking class. That was, funny enough, the first time I ever spoke about my condition. I still wouldn't name the condition, but I at least spoke about it. And people came up to me and all after and were delighted with me. So I was just like, wow, maybe, you know, I can talk about this. But also I did do a musical that year as well, which was absolutely fantastic. It was Billy Elliot. I was only one of the extras, so it was better than nothing. But just to do that and be on stage, I think it was like 3 or 4 nights in a row, was absolutely amazing. So fourth year, so in TY, I ended up breaking my femur bone after falling. I had to then really accept my chair myself. It was really tough because it was going from, you know, walking 1 second to being on the floor the next, and then being in hospital for, I think it was 3 or 4 days. But recovery was tough. But I always say to myself, was it really a full recovery? To be honest, I don't think it was, because I was never able to walk unaided again. So that really did upset me, and it was a really hard time. And then missing class and impacts of friendships. I felt like at that time in my life, I was really getting it together. And then all of a sudden this happened and I ended up missing classes, and it really impacted my friendships. I was in for about 2 hours a day. So I wasn't getting to spend much time with anybody in school. But TY was still one of the best years of my life. I feel like I very learned who I was at the time, and yeah, I wouldn't take it back for anything in the world. So the final years, so access nightmare and losing connections. Unfortunately, access got tougher because I was in the chair, which was really tough. I think I always said to myself, like, I wanted to be walking as long as possible because the world wasn't sort of made for me in my wheelchair. So that's why I tried to for as long as I did. So access started to become a nightmare. I started to get left out of a lot of things, and I really did lose a lot of connections with people. So rocky path at the start of fifth year it was. I spiraled in a sense, old ways, depression, angry, frustrated. It was just one of those times where I just couldn't get my head together. But I was back on medication, so I did take antidepressant medication, and I went off them for a while, but I went back on them and I felt like they really helped me. After a few weeks, life became better mentally when I was in fifth year, and I had no pressure academically. My parents were good to me in that way. They knew as well, though, with Duchenne's, I did have a problem with retaining information, so there was none of that pressure on me, and I knew CAO points weren't the option for me. I was going to take a different route. So COVID-19 hits. I was a lot happier in school when I started to accept myself. I think it became really fun school. Well, I was barely in class, so I'd just go around and just do my own thing. But then one day, sort of everything changed. The pandemic hit, the Leaving Cert was cancelled. So I was that year of 2020 Leaving Cert where everything sort of fell apart. But I found something through this. So a new focus was ignited. And that was my social media and youth work, which I started up just as the pandemic hit. I think it was the May of that year, and I started it all up, which has been fantastic. I've loved doing my social media work. So what my inspiration sort of for that work was to help other people. It wasn't really about me. It was sort of more so I felt like I didn't really have a lot of support when I was growing up. Like I had nobody sort of look to and sort of ask questions to. So that's why I wanted to do that. And I also wanted to do youth work to raise awareness for Duchenne and other disabilities, which I think is very important. So social media and work, well, interviews on the radio were happening then the summer after. I also did do a PLC in between that, but because of COVID, it felt like it never happened because I was never in. I think I was in once. So that was really tough actually, because it was going from like your bedroom to your desk, to your bedroom to your desk. So that was really tough. But work came true actually, one of my interviews. So the first few interviews I did LMFM, and I sort of gave out on the radio and I sort of said, here, look, like people with disabilities are not getting jobs. And after that, someone got in touch with me on Facebook and they gave me a job in a accountancy firm, which was really cool to work there. But then after that, I sort of said to myself, here, look, like I also want to do courses because I think education is very important. So I also did do courses as well on the side. So I did Today FM, I did a 10-week radio course with them. I also did a entrepreneurship with Intercity Enterprise, that was only a week-long course. I also did a week-long course with Radio Kerry, also did a course with Aspire TV, and I did do the Oliver Murphy Youth Programme, which is a programme run by the Irish Wheelchair Association. So another project that I had sort of done with the Irish Wheelchair Association was we got funding from the Toy Show appeal. So you all know the Late Late Toy Show. The Irish Wheelchair actually got some money from the appeal and were able to create this great program called the Daisy Project. And what the Daisy Project was teaching young kids about disabilities in schools. So our mission was to go into schools and talk to kids about disabilities, and there was a training course around that. So it got the kids involved, it got the teacher involved, and it really got all the staff involved in the school. So more stuff came. So I had radio, newspaper, crazy big opportunities, RTE. So I did do an interview. I know some people know me from that here, with Ryan Tubridy at the time, and when he had his own radio show for RTE, and I got to speak about my experience, which was great. I got some great feedback from that, so thanks to everybody for that. Also, I did a bit of work with the Independent, so I got an article in the Independent. I wrote an article then also for Dublin Live, for disability, so why people aren't seen in society with disabilities, which I really enjoyed doing. I also did get to go to Duchenne and speak about the connection of people with disabilities across the island, so it would be the north and the south, why that is important before we go forward with maybe United Ireland someday. And also I did get to visit the President's house, so I got to go to the He/She event, and I got to go to Michael D. Higgins' house, and I had to say it was brilliant. I was just delighted to see the dog, to be honest, but no, it was a brilliant experience, I gotta say. So hip break and PLC. Well, through all of this, I broke my hip. Recovery was tough, but as usual, I just don't give up, so I just didn't give up. So that hip break was actually, I think for me, it impacted me more than the femur break. It was during COVID, so it was a time where, you know, I wasn't able to see much people, and I was in then hospital for, I think it was a week the first time. I was in again, but they ended up putting metal into my leg. So that's sort of a weird one, because like I've had to get injections and stuff like that done, because it does get painful sometimes, but they do eventually want to take it out, so that's going to be another surgery on the way. But college came along again, which was brilliant. I really enjoyed college my second time because I actually got to go in. I went to Ballyfermot College, which is actually just up the road, and they were absolutely great to me. I did broadcast and media studies, and it was really fun. Also through that, I did get work experience with Nova and Classic Hits, which was brilliant. I loved working alongside, say, PJ Gallagher. He's so funny. But after that, actually, I was able to get a little job in Classic Hits on a Wednesday night, being the assistant producer for the Niall Boylan show, which was really cool. I did that for a couple of months, and it was a fun experience. I loved being able to answer the phones and getting people on. There were some funny people. So that was really good to see, me being able to do something like that. But social media work was still in the background. I was still doing things on the sides, like podcasts and doing little bits. I write a lot of, like, I wouldn't say it's poetry. I wouldn't put myself in that league, but I write a lot about my own life and from my own experiences with having a disability. So that's what I wanted sort of people to relate to, and people have seemed to like it, so that's good. And then busy life. So college assignments were my life. I remember that time where it was just college non-stop. I was going home. I live up near Drogheda, so I was going home. It used to take me about an hour to get home from Ballyferma, and all I was doing was literally open the laptop, doing assignments, just trying to get them done. But I think the difference with me in college was I actually enjoyed the work I did, not like school where I didn't really ever know what I liked to do in school. So that was really fun, being able to do something I was very passionate about. Then an internship came up, so that's the RTE internship we were discussing earlier. So I got placed in the social team. I did 3 weeks of training with 15 other great interns, and it's just been brilliant, to be honest. I've really enjoyed it. So if you go on any of RTE's social accounts, you may see some of the videos that have been edited. Most likely they've been me who has edited them, so you should check them out. I was also working with cool people in RTE, working hard, but maybe a bit too much. I have that sort of eager to sort of work very hard, but sometimes you need to sit down with yourself and sort of say, here, look, like, you're not like everyone else. You need a break, you know. You can't just keep going at that pace. So I was doing youth work on the side as well in the last 6 months, which has been really fun. Been doing a lot of work with the National Youth Council, who first got in touch with me through COVID. I was doing a program with them called Hear My Truth, which is 12 people from different backgrounds all come together to speak on issues. So I was the person, of course, talking about disabilities. Then the Belgium as well. I went to Belgium with the National Youth Council. I was able to bring my mum along with me, which was brilliant. And we got to go to a youth event there, which was absolutely brilliant. And then we also did get to go to a youth event in Spain, where I was speaking about people with disabilities, so from an access point of view. And I've also done the Shared Island. So the Shared Island initiative is where Ireland comes together, so the North and South, to build a better relationship for young people. So I really enjoyed doing that, and that's what I've sort of been doing for the last while. So I finished my internship, so I only finished yesterday, so it's all very new in the brain. But I recently did attend, as I say, I attended the Spanish Youth Conference and the big meeting in Dublin, where loads of people from Europe came along, and I was able to sort of tell my story at that as well. Well, I got to say now it's sort of like a focus on youth work and taking a break. I have this month, December, to just relax. I'm hoping to look for a job then after that, which would be brilliant to get. Another job maybe in the media industry. So I'm just looking forward to the future, and it's just been great to get to talk to you guys today. Also, here's my social media, so if anybody if anybody wants to follow me on there, they can message me and I'll answer any questions related to anything you want to know, or if you want any advice, there's my 3 social medias. Because I like giving people advice, especially families who have been through Duchenne. I think it's very important to have an outlet of a young person there. So if anybody wants to ask me anything or just get in touch, they're more than welcome to. And I just want to say a thank you to everybody for listening today. This has been how I've gotten to where I am today, and if anybody wants to ask me any questions after, they are more than welcome. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Conor. That was really, really great to hear your journey, and also to hear the difficult times as well, and to see where you are now, and kind of your hopes and aspirations as well for the year ahead. We'll open up the floor to discussion. What I'll probably just say again is just if you do want to say anything, just make sure the person before you has finished speaking. Just again to allow that anybody who is listening that isn't in the room, it just makes it clearer for them. And Miriam as well, if you've got any questions online, please just put your hand up, and we'll make sure that we come to you. I would just like to start with one question. Given like the journey you've gone through, if you were to give advice to your younger self, or to maybe speak to somebody who is a bit younger, is there anything that you would say to them?
I would say be yourself. I think that's the main thing. There's no point of hiding behind somebody that you're not. So what I would say to them is be yourself and embrace that you do have a disability. I think that's important as well, because you shouldn't be hidden away. It's something that you should be proud of, that you're living through it and you're able to, it is a tough life, but it's not always a bad life, you know. You have to remember that as well. You have to remember there's good and there's bad, but just to remember that you are a person as well, and you should respect yourself like anybody else would.
Yeah, no, well said, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Conor? Or any comments that they'd like to make? Just wait a minute. I'm going to be really strict now, Jim. I've been told.
Conor, congratulations on your remarkable journey there in such a short life. You've achieved so much. I'm in awe of you, really, to be honest. But anyway, just a quick question. What's your podcast? Where can I find you?
So I don't have a podcast in
I thought
particular,
you said you had.
but I've been on podcasts. So I've appeared
Oh, you've
on
been
many.
on, right.
So I would, if you want to see like what I've sort of been on, you can just check through my social media accounts,
Right.
And they'll all be there.
I look forward to your own podcast.
Thanks. One day.
Can I just say, Conor, I think we can find a place for you here in MDI. I think you deserve to be part of our working force. You're an inspiration to all our young members and our families out there, so well done. I'm proud of you. I feel like a mammy. I'm sorry, but I do. That's it. Hazel,
I know Hazel has a question up here.
Mine was just a small practical thing. You were at college here in Ballyfermot, but living near Drogheda. Were you able to commute on your own, or did you have a PA service?
No, so the college actually organised taxis for me. So through the PLC course, I was able to get funding for taxis to drop me there and drop me home. So a taxi driver would be able to bring me there and bring me home, and I would just get in touch with them during the day and just say, here, look, like I need a lift at this time or that time.
And the college organised that for you?
College organised that,
Brilliant.
yeah.
Most second level colleges organised that. Yeah, it's not an issue generally.
So yeah, that's how I got to and from here.
Thank you. Donna, do you have a...
Yeah, I just want to say, brilliant talk. Like my son is 16, so he's in transition year. As you said, best thing ever. I think just to do different things, and he's made an awful lot more friends this year than he has. And like you, he would have processing problems with learning, and we're trying to find a pathway for, what he's going to do, how he's going to manage the leaving cert, how he's going to, please God, get to college, because we live in Maynooth, 10 minutes from a university, so that's our plan. But I think, and I did want him to come in here today, but he's probably stuffing his face with pizza gaming. But I think you'd be really good at talking to maybe the older teenagers, the likes of teenagers in transition year, who are, everything you've said rings true with me. Everything you said, like he finds it hard to keep up with friends physically and emotionally. They're all out doing whatever they do, and he can't be. He'd be, in a power chair for, God, what is he, 4 or 5 years probably now, I'm trying to think, and would be very dependent on SNAs, PAs, and me and his father. So going out is an issue with toilets. My life, toilets are an issue with his life. But it's really good to hear from you that you had struggles. Like I have 2 older lads, they have struggles too. They don't Duchenne, but they have struggles. Every teenager has struggles. And you're right to accept, and it's taken years for me to get my son to accept what he has, and we're very black and white in our house. You can't walk, can't do anything about it, but you have lots of good points and work on them. So I think I talk even to teenagers from sort of probably 3rd year, 4th year, 5th year up, who are looking at what they're going to do with the rest of their lives, because years ago you didn't plan like that for Duchenne, but now we are, because healthcare has improved, everything has improved so much. So that's a massive, not a challenge, that's the wrong word, it's a big part of our lives now, trying, like you did, to work out his path. Because it's not the same path as his brothers. I don't mean in a physical way, I mean in learning. I find the learning and the way the leaving cert is in this country is a disgrace for anybody, whether they've dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, whether they have any processing problems, which my son absolutely has, processing and retention and lots of other things going on, but is well able to learn and well able to do well in exams when you do it his way, and you had to learn that as well. So I think talking to older teenagers, you talking to them, and showing that you went through tough times with friends, with emotions, with anger, but you come out the other side. And I think it would be really good for MDI to facilitate that. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think, but not for younger boys. I think it's probably too much Third year up,
No,
I think when they're doing state exams, choosing, like we're at the stage, Evan has to choose his subjects for fifth year, is the word I'm trying to look for, but you're so constrained because his arm function wouldn't be great, so it's a lot of subjects he can't do.
Yeah.
He wants to do metalwork, I went, off you go, rock the boat, you're not going to do the metalwork.
Yeah.
It's not saying no to be mean, it's saying no to be practical. There's no point taking up a subject that he's going to get so frustrated with.
Yeah.
So I think that would be really good down the line to maybe think of doing something like that for the older teenagers who are fourth year, fifth year, sixth year, third year, whatever.
Yeah.
To listen to you,
Yeah.
you know. And
Sorry, I need to get Michelle got a hand up, so what's Michelle first?
Thank you. Just first of all, thank you so much. I've written loads of notes, and actually just to say, and I know this is just taken just for a minute, but what you've said rings so true with any of the young people that we've spoken to already for the research project we're doing, and these are young adults. And just that idea of trying to sort of fit in within your school, where you're probably the only person in your class, and you're trying to fit in, so you're kind of hiding a bit of yourself, and then you're denying a part of yourself. But actually, what a lot of them say as well is that idea is, it's not that they're looking for a role model that went and saved the world and did whatever, but just to talk to somebody else as a role model who's the same, you know, that they can connect with, and how important. They didn't have that, and so a lot of them are saying to me, if I had had that, of course, a lot of them avoid this kind of disability association because they don't want to be seen as being part of that either. But actually would say, if we could find a way of having other people who are not too far ahead of them, talk to them about a way that they could see, I could see myself there. I see myself there, and how important that would be.
Yeah, that'd be brilliant.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Tanya?
No, I'd feel exactly the same way with linking in with schools. Conor recently came back to the school that he went to, and done a talk for fifth year, wasn't it?
5th years, yeah.
Yeah, and for the school, actually, they were quite emotional, the teachers, because they knew how hard it was for him. And he's the last person they would have thought would have come back to do a talk, because he spent half the time hiding in the toilets. So, like, you know, so if something could be set up, you know, by MDI for Conor or other lads that are that bit older, to go in and say, okay, so forget about what you can't do. Focus on your ability. What are you good at? What do you like? What are you passionate about? And don't give up on your dreams. Change them. Have new hopes. Have new dreams. Yeah. What can you do? Yeah.
they're all going through something.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a physical disability. There's an awful lot of disabilities out there that cause such, you know, trouble in fifth and sixth year. You know, just to see somebody who's been through what you've been through, but it doesn't have to be what you've been through to be something similar. But, you know,
To hopefully relate to at least.
I think a lot of people shine when they get out of school, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, just first I'd like to say thanks very much, Conor, for sharing that.
No worries.
Absolutely, as a dad of 2 young Duchenne boys, and even my other son Sam, if any of them end up like you, I'd be so immensely proud of them. I think, like, when you get a diagnosis like this for your kids, first you think, oh, this is the end of the world, whatever. But like, it's after doing me the world of good today to listen to you and share your story, and I'm so proud of you.
Well, thanks so much.
Thanks.
So much.
You can't love them. And I was just going to say, I think, like, you know, we're talking about how beneficial it is for the teenagers and that to hear from you. But as Jamie said, as newly diagnosed parents, it's very hard to, you know, it feels like you've lost your future, and it's very hard to piece together that new future without any experience or any people near you with it. And, like, you know, that you've done that clearly out here today. And I mean, even as Jay said, for our older son Sam, who's not living with Duchenne, to have a future like that in front of him, you know, and it just, it's so uplifting. It really, really is. And, you know, as Jamie said, like, we feel so proud just to know you. Like, you're an amazing person. You really are an inspiration. Thank you so much.
And for us, like, we try and want to be as positive as we can. That we want to put Duchenne out there into our community. We want everyone in our community to know about the condition, and to listen to you to say, yeah, that's the right thing to do. It's just, yeah. Oh yeah, no, that's 100% what I mean. I'm only about the positivity.
Yeah.
You know, I only want it to be positive. And to hear you kind of echo that, it's 100% the right. I know that I'm doing the right thing and I'm thinking along the right lines.
Yeah, I think it's so important to be positive though. I think that's what's helped me, because when I was in that stage of being so negative, everything around me, even the good things, are starting to become bad.
Yeah.
You know, so I think to have that positive outlook on life, even though it is obviously challenging, it is a good way to be. So.
And then for like listening to you, and I'll be thinking of you now on my journey, and that's going to be able to help me stay positive, because that's going to reflect on the lads.
Yeah.
Me being positive, and that's like down to people like you. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Conor.
Thanks so much.
Great. Okay, I think that's lovely.
One last thing. Thanks, Conor. Just, and it was a journey for you. Like, it's not all, sunshine and roses. Like, it sounds like you went through some very difficult times. And I suppose what I think we need to get out there, what actually helped you? What helped you to get to the point you're at today, so we can facilitate that easier journey for other people, that they don't have to, that it's going to be nothing, it is going to be a struggle. I'm not trying to deny that, but like, what supports or what would help, and I don't know if you have any insight in that, or we'll talk to you again later.
I think counselling is a big thing that helps. I think being able to talk to somebody, because when I was younger, I was able to have a psychologist, which was brilliant. But there was a point in my life where I got to where I shut off and I wouldn't talk to the same psychologist. So someone else did have to come in as well, which I found very helpful. So I would say talking to somebody is very important for growing up, especially when there's so many things going on in your life. It's just nice to be able to not talk to a parent, just talk to somebody else. So I would say that's important. Also, just to know it's okay to be going through things, it's not all going to be perfect, and it's okay to have a disability and be struggling with that. It's just, I would like to be able to have, at that age, be able to have, teenagers be speaking about it, and not just hide it away. Where much so years ago, it was like, if you had a disability, hide it away, it's a thing in the corner. Where now they're getting better at that. But I wanted to get to an even bigger level for teenagers, so they feel comfortable and they can grow up and not be feeling bad about themselves, really, so that's what I would say.
Siobhán, did you have any question or any other?
No.
I'm not sure if you put your hand up. No. Okay, that's fine. That's okay. Okay, thank you so much, Conor. That's been brilliant. Yeah, thank you. Thanks a million. So next up, we've got Siobhán O'Shea. Siobhán is a senior occupational therapist who is working part-time in the Central Remedial Clinic and is also doing a research master's through the School of Occupational Therapy in Trinity College. Siobhán's research involves meeting young adults with muscular dystrophy, particularly Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy, and completing interviews regarding their transition from childhood to adulthood. Siobhán is going to speak about what transition means and about her research in more detail now. And I'd also just like to mention, I know we've already introduced yourself, but obviously Michelle is also in the room, and Michelle is Siobhán's supervisor on the study. So I'll hand over to you, Siobhán.
Hi, I'm a bit nervous now with the camera. It's easier to talk to people. I just wanted to say hi, I'm Siobhán O'Shea. I'm a senior occupational therapist, and I'm really delighted to have the opportunity to be here today and to meet with you all. And I have a tough act to follow. I really thoroughly enjoyed this morning and hearing everybody's opinion and voice and journey and story. It's been really, really good. So I'm an occupational therapist, and I work part-time in the CRC. I'm based more out in Clondalkin in the CHO area, but I do cover some of the clinics, the neuromuscular clinics in Clontarf as well. And then I'm doing the other half of my time, I am working with Michelle, and we're doing research into the lived experience of young people in the transition to adulthood. So I'll crack on. The today I'm just going to talk a little bit, I divided it up, I wasn't sure what way, but just to explain what we mean about transition in general, and then what we mean about adulthood, and then an overview of the STAR project, which is the bigger project that's going on through Trinity, and then the specific focus of Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy, which I'm particularly interested in. So we crack on. So that's just what I've said. It's just really going to focus today on transition, adulthood, and then STAR is the overall project, and it's supporting transitions to adult resources projects. So really what we're hoping to get out of it is to hear the lived experience of people with Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy and to hear what supports they identify that would help with the journey to adulthood. So transition, what does it mean? So I've taken a lot of definitions because I've been reading a lot of literature. So this was a definition that I came across in the Association for Real Change in Scotland. And they define transition as a period when young people, generally aged 14 to 25, develop from children to adults. And it's just important that it's not a single event like leaving school, but that growing up process, that it unfolds as a journey over several years, and it involves significant emotional, physical, intellectual, and physiological changes. So rather than just focusing on we're moving from primary school to secondary school, we're going from junior cycle to senior cycle, we're going from secondary school to where our journey wants to take us, that to look at transition as it's a person's journey and it's a person's life story, like Conor just shared with her there, was really good. So during this period, young people progressively assume greater autonomy in many different areas of their life and are required to adjust to different experiences, expectations, processes, places, and routines. So transition really is a time of a lot of change, and it's a time of a lot of questions that come up for people, a time when you have to really question your journey, where you're going. I suppose transitions are always like a beginning and an end. Like you said earlier, you're leaving behind maybe your childhood days in primary school, and there's a whole new set of expectations, and there's a lot for people to cope with during that time period. So transitions also impact on the family of those who care for the child or the young person. So as much as there's a lot of change in the transition period for the child and the person growing up, I think it's hard for parents too, because you go from your little baby that you protect and you look after and you're there for and have full control of decisions, to ensuring that they have the skills to go out and navigate the world and become independent and achieve potential in whatever they hope and wish to do. So I just thought it was a nice definition of transition, in that it's a whole journey for a person from growing up, from being a child to becoming an independent adult and living the life they choose. Okay, so that was just general definition, but in terms of relating to Duchenne muscular dystrophy, during the last few years, Abrams reports that there's been significant improvements in the way Duchenne is managed, so that living with Duchenne muscular dystrophy poses a range of medical, emotional, and practical challenges. And I just think it's important to acknowledge the medical impact and the life-limiting association with Duchenne, that we can talk about transition, but transition for your child who doesn't have Duchenne is going to be different for the child with Duchenne, and just to give that some acknowledgement. So these challenges can come to the fore as boys and young men make transition between child and adult services, and are more broadly at transitions over the life course relating to age, identity, and sense of self. So I've really just taken snapshots from a lot of the literature, but it's kind of reinforces what you've all been saying today. And that the functional presentation and the rate of disease progression and ultimate prognosis for children and adults can vary depending on the type of Duchenne muscular dystrophy you have, but that in the past decades that there's been considerable strides, thankfully, in the medical interventions and the management available, and that this has led to significant increases in expectancy and quality of life. So I think it's even at the point in time that it's evolving, and now that there is hope and expectation for people living with Duchenne muscular dystrophy to live longer lives. So it's important for us to acknowledge when they're 13, 14, 15, that you need to plan and make decisions. What do you want to do? Do you want a career in media? Do you want to go to further into education? And to plan and to see that there's hope and progress and positivity as well, and to plan for that. So increasingly more people with Duchenne are living longer. And this is because there's been implementation of cardiopulmonary care, broader use of steroids, just lots of new therapies that have changed the history and the life expectancy of Duchenne. And now 99% of people with Duchenne survive into adulthood. And this leads to many challenges in some areas of function. One of the fundamental issues is the transfer of Duchenne muscular dystrophy patients from child to adult healthcare services. This isn't necessarily the focus that we're putting into our research, but I just thought it's a very important issue to acknowledge and to highlight, that it's a very big, like you mentioned earlier in the room, it's like falling off a cliff edge. So I just wanted to mention a little bit to that too. So adolescents and adults with Duchenne muscular dystrophy have complex healthcare needs that are associated with the progression of the disease. So I just put in some resources, because while I was just reading up and looking around information around this, I didn't know about this steppingup.ie. So I don't know, are people familiar? There's a link here to it. It's a website it's an Irish website, which was good to come across. And it's the Stepping Up website was created with young people and medical professions to help young people prepare to move to adult healthcare. And the transition stages will help guide you from just starting to think about moving to adult services right through to actually making the move. I know from work myself, if I'm at the clinic, I know there's usually a long list for the OT. I really appreciate that. And a lot of it might be around equipment or home or school, different assessments that might be helpful, or access to SNAs. And a lot of times we don't take the time and the space to actually, when you're younger, 12, 13, 14, start talking about transition. It just doesn't happen. We know it should. And I suppose that's part of the reason I'm really interested in the research. I think it's such a big area and really can help somebody have a more fulfilling life if we can give the skills and the attention to this at the right time. So on this website, it was actually quite a good website to have come across, but they break it up into different steps. So the first one is you're thinking about transition, and your first thought was, why do I have to move? I know everybody in this clinic, this space, it works. Why do I have to move on? And there's just resources around that. And I think I'm not sure how many clinicians or OTs or physios on the team actually know about this yet, because I haven't come across it at work. So it's something you can have ownership of yourself. The next step then is planning your transition. So I think maybe there's a little bit more support around the planning stage, and that people will probably answer your question, even if there isn't resources to give a lot of time commitment to it. But it's really important to familiarize yourself with where you're going, where you're moving to, because adult services in Ireland look very different to how children's services are run. And then making the transition. So when you click on each of these links on the website, it goes into more detail, but that hopefully having gone through the first two stages, transition is a process, and that you'll feel a little bit more confident about owning your own transition and understanding what your needs are, and making sure you can advocate for yourself to have your needs met as best as they can. It's just a tiny brief overview. I'm not really here to speak about CRC, but I just feel it's important to mention that I do work there. And I know the current services, the CRC, there's the National Consultant-Led Multidisciplinary Service, and a few people will know about that. So it sees children up to the age of 18 who present with neuromuscular disorder, including muscular dystrophy. And at the age of 16, the issue or the topic of transition can be brought up. But I know I've been at appointments myself where it's just said, you're 16 now, I'm going to write to the consultant in Beaumont and we'll start the process. And everybody's like, okay, and that's a box ticked. I do know that's the reality. And I know it's important that there's more time given to it, but at the moment I see a few nodding heads. I think that's how it's dealt with. And then Children's Health Ireland, that will be through, say, Tallaght and Professor MacDonald. They have their neuromuscular clinic there as well that runs up to age 18. And then just to mention that they're the more specialist services, but that the services in Ireland are changing a bit and transitioning themselves, and that before you would have access to all your services maybe through CRC or Enable Ireland, whereas now there's Children's Disability Network teams, which are not diagnosis-based services. They're based on family identified need. So the support they provide is through the individual family service plan, where you get to meet once a year with your team and identify 3 goals, and they're the goals that will be worked on. Just to say, though, in addition, they are trying to give some more universal supports, and I know some of the teams I link in with and work closely with, they do have support with transition to adulthood, again, dependent on team resources. And a lot of the times it would be the social worker and the psychologist who would lead out in that. So the social worker is really good at pointing you in the direction of what services you can access, or funding for different types of allowances that you can be entitled to. And then I know they give a general talk maybe twice a year on general universal supports for transition to primary school, transition to secondary school, transition out of school. And your CDNT should, if you want to be linked with the HSE New Directions, they can link you to usually a disability advisor in the HSE who can point you in direction of what further education options you may have, or day services that you may wish to avail of. And the HSE New Directions website has information on that. So that was my little talk about transition, and when I talk about transition, that's where I'm coming from. So just then, in terms of attaining adult roles, it was like, well, what do we mean by becoming an adult? Like, what does that really mean? And I think it means different things for different people. And the important piece is for our young people with Duchenne, growing up with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, is that you control. It's your adulthood, it's your decisions, it's your direction. And what roles you take on, how do we support you to get to achieve that? So to achieve full potential, young people often require support in different areas of lives. So there's professional considerations associated with the move from school or college, or the transfer from child to adult services. So there's almost like there's the whole, from what I've seen around the whole transition piece, there's a big piece around transition from childhood to adult medical services. But what there isn't so much written about, or there isn't as much said, is moving into adult roles and trying to figure out, where am I and how do I fit into this world? So these may include identifying and achieving positive destinations in employment, education or training, managing welfare, housing changes, reviewing healthcare needs, providing information and advocacy, and assessing capacity and managing risk. So I think there isn't as many supports for our young people and our parents to navigate the whole system and going, well, I want further education, or I want to go to work, or I want to live independently. And I think it can be a minefield trying to navigate all that. And also the assessing, managing risk, that as an adult, that you should be able to have your own say and try, and I think it can be a complex relationship growing up between parents and children, because it has to be, because your parents are looking out for you in your whole journey, more so maybe than a child who didn't have Duchenne's. So these processes should have the young person's personal outcomes and aspirations and well-being at the centre. And when their well-being is fully supported, that they will be better able to achieve their full potential. That came from the ARC Scotland document as well around transitions. And it's really, I suppose, coming from the OT perspective as well, that we all try to help. And it's like, it's not about helping, it's trying to make sure we have the supports and strategies in place to allow the young people to make their own decisions. So for teens and adults with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, which is progressive neurological condition that starts off when you're a younger child, adequate treatment options and lifetime care are essential for a successful transition to adulthood. And there is little current research into the psychosocial elements of the transition to adulthood for patients with Duchenne or Becker's muscular dystrophy. and that whatever information there is there, it's typically limited to small sample sizes. And I think that's why we felt it was really important to look at this, that we're looking to hear from the people on this journey so that they can advise us on what the supports they need are. So domains associated with role attainment. So in the research so far, what's important to people is that you'd have medical knowledge and awareness. So as you're growing up, and perhaps with your teams, either in CHI or CRC, that the young person themselves may become more aware and not leave all that to mum or dad to know ask all the questions of the doctors. Maybe as you're like 14, 15, 16, you might ask a question that's important to you. Understand the medication you're on, why it's important to take, and take more ownership of your therapy programs as well, your physio, your OT, and just even an understanding of why it's important. And then that also gives you the opportunity to say, well, no, that doesn't work for me. That's not what, or, you know, to guide that a little bit so you can say what you need. Also just general life skills, so independence, staying home alone, ability to complete your daily physical needs, having choice in selecting your PAs, responsibility for your own care, your employment, and managing your daily expenses. So it's just typically what we want our teens to do. And it's just making sure that there's the opportunity there to empower yourself to do that. Social support and relationships, including experience with peers and romantic relationships, desire for romantic relationships, and satisfaction with experienced intimacy. They're just kind of areas that more research is needed in so that we can hear from people themselves what's needed. So role attainment in emerging adulthood. So in his discussion, P commented that improved medical management and our changes to family and social expectations for adult role attainment are expected to impact transition to adulthood, as are new opportunities for employment and independent living. And an important area for future research is to explore what adult roles are perceived by individuals with Duchenne to be the most appealing and important. I think it's important to have the person's voice with Duchenne as opposed to people assuming what's needed. So the research we're involved in, there's a larger project Michelle is involved in, which is supporting transitions to adulthood resources, and it involves people with disabilities who may have cerebral palsy, visual impairment, and then Duchenne is the piece that I've focused in on myself. So the background is that there was previous research done in the discipline of occupational therapy in 2017, and this was carried out with young adults with hemiplegic cerebral palsy. And it identified challenges that young people with disabilities can experience during the time of transition, such as moving into adulthood, becoming an adult, and that preparing for this is not really addressed within practice. And while there's been some focus on transition to adult services within service provision, the research highlighted that supports to assist with preparing to move into adulthood, living an adult life may also be beneficial. So the overall aim and the current project of the Transition to Adulthood research team is to have adults with any physical or sensory impairment reflect on their experience in their transition to adulthood. And what the team is interested to hear about is what young people themselves found challenging, what might have helped, and what supports they can suggest would prepare young people in advance and during the transition. So it's really trying to hear from people who've been through it, what's helped for them, what challenges they had, and then trying to come up with some resources to have in place. So start on the DMD research part, which is the part I'm involved with. So as part of this overall current research, it became apparent that a closer look at the transition experience in relation to boys and men was warranted. There's very little written specifically about young men with Duchenne muscular dystrophy and their journey. And I know this was discussed with Muscular Dystrophy Ireland, and they agreed to collaborate on the project, and there was funding to cover some of the fees for the master's student, which is why I'm here. And thank you, I really appreciate the opportunity. So Duchenne muscular dystrophy and supporting transition to adulthood. I just wanted to put this piece in. I'm not sure if any of you are aware, there was a very recent report launched by Suzanne Glover, Dr. Suzanne Glover. She works with Pathfinders in Northern Ireland, and she did a research study over the last 3 years about entering adulthood with Duchenne muscular dystrophy. So it was led by Suzanne Glover, and she had a group of 4 young men with Duchenne muscular dystrophy who were involved from the very beginning, and they helped to create the questions and create the whole format and guided the study, and were involved the whole way through. And the research explored topics such as education, confidence, change, independence, and social connection through in-depth interviews with people with Duchenne muscular dystrophy. So there was 4 young men with Duchenne worked alongside Suzanne over the whole project and gave their voice and their opinion to that. And then they interviewed 15 young men with Duchenne for the project. And the aim is for this work to highlight that the voices and needs of people with Duchenne muscular dystrophy must be at the core of their own transition to adulthood, as well as within wider policy and research development. So I think it's trying to look at transition through conversations I've had, when you talk about transition first, everybody talks about the transition from CRC to Beaumont, and that kind of gets taken over because that's not operational and working the way people want it so far at the moment. And I think it's very topical at the moment to try to get the voice of young people out so that there's more needs. It's not just going from a medical service to a medical service, that you're on a journey through life and that you're transitioning through many different stages, and that we want to really try and find out what supports, what the challenges are to start, and then what the supports are that would help. So that's just a link to the document. They have 2 versions. They have an easy read version and the fuller report. And then our current research has 3 components. So the first component is the experience of adults with Duchenne muscular dystrophy. So that's the piece I'm working at the moment, and that has ethical approval and everything in place. So any young adults who have Duchenne muscular dystrophy and are willing to share their story with me, I would love if they could contact me and become part of the research. There's 2 other components that we're hoping to look at, and it's the perception of parents of teenagers or adults with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, because along the journey, I think it's really important to recognize how the parents found the journey and their perceptions of how they saw the challenges alongside how their child did, and also the perception of service providers. As a service provider myself, we can all see gaps and we can all see areas we'd like to improve. So it's trying to hopefully get a whole kind of overall picture and see where we go with that. So it'll give us an in-depth understanding, which will then, excuse me, which will then help make recommendations and develop supports. We are currently recruiting to the 3 components. We are almost currently recruiting. I'm waiting for the ethics approval for the interviews with the parents and with the service providers, but hopefully by the end of the month that should be in place. But for the moment, I do have the approval to meet and interview with the young adults. So the groups I'm looking to hear for, if you're 18 or older, we'd like to hear from you, for you to share your experiences of transition to adulthood, which is very typically, it's trying to capture the story that you just shared with us today, Conor, which was great. And then also parents, have you a teenager or a young adult? So we'd like you to share your concerns, your expectations and your hopes with us. And service providers, we'd like you to share your perspective on service provision relating to transition to adulthood. So a bit about the study, it's a qualitative study. So that means it's semi-structured individual interviews. They can take place online, I think for the young adults with Duchenne, I have no problem. I can come to your home, I can interview at a place that's convenient and comfortable for you. With the service providers and the parents, we're probably more likely to do it online if that's easier or more convenient. And they'll be audio recorded and then transcribed into a Word document. And then we destroy the audio recording, and identifying information is removed from all of the documents. So there will be nothing in any of the research that will identify any particular person. And then all the transcripts will be combined and analysed together. So it's the collective voice of young people with Duchenne. So life expectancy with Duchenne has increased significantly, and generations of men are leading lives now that many didn't expect them to be leading. And the research wants to capture the lived experiences and hear the voice of people with Duchenne and parents of children and adults with Duchenne to influence how services can be developed. And it is really important that we hear from the people experiencing this process for themselves or their child. And then we can make futures accessible by making them visible, like going into the secondary school and speaking to the transition students. You almost need to see it to be it. And it's really important that we hear from people experiencing the process themselves or their child so that their voice can be heard. There's no point me going into TY students and explaining I can't give the lived experience, I can't share what it's like. So we have been slow to recruit in the first part of the study, and I'd be delighted if any of you wish to participate, and be grateful if you could share the study information. We do have flyers and advertise on social media. I think it was on the MDI website as well. And if you want more information, or I'd be delighted to answer any of your questions, even if you wanted to just ask about it by contacting me. Doesn't mean you need to participate. You could just ask further information, further questions. So thank you very much.
Okay, our final speaker, who actually wasn't on the initial Eventbrite, but has since been added. I am absolutely delighted to welcome Adith, who is joining us online this afternoon. So Adith is a 25-year-old who is living with Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy. He lives in the United States, in the state of Maryland, and he is Vice President of Parent Project Muscular Dystrophy's Adult Advisory Committee, otherwise known as the PAC. You can correct me if I've said it wrong. He also works part-time as an engineer. And Adith is here today to share a little bit about the PAC and what the work that they do. And outside of that, he's also involved with advocacy work in his local community, the University of Alma Mater, and at the state and federal level. So I've got your presentation here. So if it's okay with you, you just tell me when to go next, and I will control the slides from our end.
Perfect. Sounds good to me.
And I should probably say as well, Adith, we've got a range of people in the room today. We have got some healthcare professionals, some researchers, we've got people with living with Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy, and we've also got parents as well. So a wide audience to talk to. So I'm just going to share your screen, or share my screen.
Sure. All right. Well, first of all, I would like to say thank you, for the invitation to speak. Very happy to, network with our friends across the Atlantic. And, thank you for giving me the opportunity to be with you all today. And I promise I'll keep this pretty short. But yes, if you wouldn't mind just flipping back to the first slide real quick. Great. So I just wanted to start off with saying, my name is Adith Thummalapalli. I am the Vice President of Parent Project Muscular Dystrophy's Adult Advisory Committee. And so I'm just here to talk to everyone a little bit about what it is we do and sort of, who we are. So thank you. So next slide, please. So who are we? The PAC is comprised of adults living with Duchenne and Becker muscular dystrophy, as well as some manifesting carriers of Duchenne and Becker. So currently we have 36 members from all across the United States, but we are looking to expand internationally. I'll touch on that a little bit later. But yeah, so this is just a photograph of some of our current members. Next slide, please. So what is it that we do? So here this is basically our mission statement. The PAC takes a holistic approach to advocacy, addressing care, community, and quality of life. We work together to elevate the lives of individuals living with Duchenne and Becker through mentoring, outreach, education, and we support the teen and adult voices of Duchenne and Becker as an extension of Parent Project Muscular Dystrophy. So our three main areas of focus are advocacy, patient outreach and support, and community building. So, next slide. Yeah, sorry. So how do we do this? How do we sort of attack those three main areas? So every year we plan and we attend an annual meeting in Washington, D.C., our capital, and we lobby the U.S. Congress for funding and support of PPMD objectives, and we develop and maintain relationships with lawmakers. So we're constantly in touch with our representatives in state and federal government, just to make sure that we're all moving forward with the policies and things that will, improve quality of life. What else? We also plan and attend PPMD's annual conference, very similar to, what you guys are doing right now. And we have sessions for patients, scientists, caregivers, and the public, just to educate people about living with Duchenne and Becker, and, just raise awareness. And the last part, fostering connection between individuals with Duchenne and Becker and other muscular dystrophies from all over the world. So we help connect people from all across the world to foster friendships, partnerships through regular virtual socials and other events. And, one of the most important things, I think, growing up, living with Duchenne, living with Becker, is to have that sort of community, to have people you can talk to, people you can relate to, people where you don't need to, explain to them what's going on. They get it. They understand what it means to live with a disability. And that's something that is critical to, having a good life and improving your quality of life. So that's one of the big things that we strive to do as the PAC. Next slide, please. So now a little bit of, you can go back. Yep. A little bit of how the PAC itself operates. So we meet via Zoom twice a month to stay updated with projects and discuss ongoing work. We have guest speakers and member spotlights to learn about what else our members are involved in. We have working groups for every active project, and that they meet occasionally outside of our bigger meetings, but most of the work that we do is done on our own time. So it's very flexible. And we moderate a Facebook group, Instagram page, Discord server, and our own app as just multiple ways for people to connect with one another and sort of foster that community. Next slide, please. So this is just a list of some of the current projects we have going on. So as you can see, we do a lot with networking, with other MD organizations. We have a newsletter. We work on social media things. One of our projects, we're working with pharmaceutical companies to develop a white paper for drug trials, just sort of a document to sort of guide how the ideal ways that drug trials can really benefit our community. We're trying to improve inclusivity in dating apps. We have a mentorship program, and we're currently working on a grant for families in need to help cover items that aren't covered by insurance. So we have a lot of things going on, and members can be involved with as much or as little as they would like. Again, our main goal is to foster that sort of connection, that community, and use our voices to help those with Duchenne and Becker worldwide. Next slide, please. And so why do we do it? I think a lot of us have different answers as to why we are involved with advocacy, why we're involved with the Duchenne and Becker community. This is just a couple of things why the PAC does what we do. To make change in society, improve the quality of life of individuals with muscular dystrophy, connect people living with Duchenne and Becker, to form lasting relationships and networks, to support each other as we fight for a cure for Duchenne and Becker, and to raise awareness and educate the world about muscular dystrophy in general, not specific to any type of muscular dystrophy, just in general. Next slide. So thank you. I hope that was informative. And like I said, one of our goals is to help those in other countries set up something similar to the PAC. And, that's one of the new initiatives we're working on, essentially putting together an instruction manual almost for organizations in other countries, like Muscular Dystrophy Ireland and others, to help, you guys set up something like this, a community like this within your own nations. Because as we all know, while many of our challenges are the same, many are vastly different from country to country. And, establishing a group like this, where it's people with Duchenne, people with Becker, advocating for themselves, it truly goes a long way. And, it helps us, people living with Duchenne and Becker, get more involved with our communities and actually work to make change. So again, thank you for inviting me to speak. And, if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them at this time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adith. And I know you weren't involved in our conversations earlier on, but definitely one of the things that kind of seems to have ran through today is having that support, whether it's at a parent-to-parent level, but also then kind of the kind of peer support and advisory and advocacy as well at that kind of young adult age. So, I think we'd be definitely really interested to connect in with yourselves. I think you mentioned you might have started with 4 people initially, and now you've got a really good group together, and you're doing some really fantastic work. And it's just great to see that the voices of people who are living with the conditions, you're together we are stronger, and you are creating change over there, and really promoting awareness, but also making changes for the better for people who are living with Duchenne and Becker. So yeah, we'd be really keen to link in with yourselves. We've got a great person here already who works in in raising awareness about disability and Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and also in an advocacy space. So I know we have some people in our community that would be could really make a difference in the space if the right supports are there for them. And again, we've got parents in the room today who, hopefully kind of hearing these stories really, gives you some as well kind of inspiration and hope and motivation for their kids as they get older, that, there's great work that regardless of a disability that you have, you can still have an amazing impact in your community and really make a difference. So given that Adith isn't available locally, if anybody has any questions for him, it might be easier to ask them now, given he's on a very different time frame as well for us, or just any comments. Okay.
If you can ask Adith as well, just to make sure that we don't cross-talk over each other.
Oh, yeah. Or I know we've also got Miriam online. I don't know, Miriam, if you wanted to make any comments either at this stage.
And also, if you'd like to share my email with anybody who might have questions, please feel free to do so.
Exactly, yeah, I will. We'll share your contact details, and as I say, yeah, you know, today we're really kind of gathering the voices from our own community as to what they would like, things that we could do and changes that we can make and what supports we can put in place. So it's good now that they've also heard about what's happening overseas and how you're creating resources that can be shared with other countries as well. So thank you very much. I'm mindful it's probably 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. in the morning there for you. So really appreciate you also getting up and joining us from the other side of the world. So thank you so much, Adith. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having